Member for Sandringham.
Thank you, Speaker, and I congratulate you on your re-election as Speaker as well. My question, Speaker, is to the Treasurer. The government's pre-election budget update has confirmed that budgeted spending exceeds budgeted income by $10.2 billion. That's more than $1,500 owing for every Victorian man, woman and child. How are families expected to live within their means, especially at this time of year, when this government continues to overspend and to waste?
Order. Order. I'll call the Treasurer when the House comes to order. Treasurer.
I thank the member for Sandringham for his question, and I congratulate him on his elevation to the Shadow Treasury portfolio. Also, I was a little bit disappointed with the question because I was anticipating that I would have got the question from the head of the Economics Brains Trust from the opposition, the member for Caulfield, but I'll be relegated to the B team apparently. Yes, let's be very clear. Let's be very clear. As a government, we made some clear and sustained choices during the course of an insidious pandemic that put the well-being of the Victorian community at risk. We chose to rate their well-being above the short-term challenges of our balance sheet. We did that for all the right reasons. We put $44 billion into growing the Victorian economy. We put $13 billion into assisting Victorian businesses to stay whole and also to be able to look after and to connect with their customers and to keep a connection with their workforce. That is what a government that cares about the well-being of the Victorian people and Victorian business do. We have a strategy to deal with the challenges that we confront. We unveiled it in the November 2020 budget. It is our four-step fiscal strategy and it is demonstrating its worth. We were the only jurisdiction in the nation to put in place a fiscal strategy to demonstrate how we would repair our budgetary position and how we would be able to demonstrate to the Victorian people step by step how that repair worked. The first step was that we would create jobs and that we would grow the economy. Well, we now have 382,000 more jobs in the Victorian economy as a consequence of this government's effort since the lowest point in the economic cycle in September 2020. That's exactly what this government did. We rated the well-being and the employment opportunities of Victorians, getting them back to work and using our balance sheet to assist them in being able to do it. On top of that, we said we would grow the economy. The Victorian economy is now travelling 50% faster than the national average. And that's due to the very strategic investments that we made to grow the economy. The second step in our fiscal strategy was that we would deliver an operating cash surplus. And in this financial year, we will deliver an operating cash surplus. We also indicated the third step was that we would deliver an operating surplus. It's a little bit more complex, a little bit more difficult to deliver an operating surplus compared to an operating cash surplus because we have to provide for the depreciation of the state assets. But we will still, and we are still, on course to be able to deliver that operating surplus by 25-26. And finally, we indicated that our final step in the strategy, once we brought the budget back into surplus, was that we would begin to manage and bring down our debt profile. And we've already made a very substantial contribution to that. A $10 billion future fund by the end of the forward estimates will ensure that we have the right capacity to intervene and to make appropriate decisions about debt management until, of course, we're in a much stronger position for the purposes of drawing down on that position. Unlike those opposite, who had a strategy which was all about focusing on their welfare and their own short-term political objectives. Let's not forget that on the Thursday, presumably after a long lunch, the Thursday evening, there was a purported attempt to cost.
Treasurer will resume his seat. Point of order, member for Sandringham.
Reflecting upon members in the other place is unparliamentary, Speaker. I'd ask you to provide some guidance to the Treasurer about that comment which he just made.
Order. Order. I ask the Treasurer to come back to answering the question.
So, Speaker, let's just remember that those opposite did not tell the Victorian people until the Thursday before an election that they had a plan. The plan was effectively that they were going to clean out the future fund. It was a little bit of creative accounting, you've got to say, a little bit of creative accounting to effectively flip a realised value on an asset and put it onto the output side of the ledger, but we won't worry about that. I'm sure Treasury will be able to provide accounting for dummies course for you at some point. The second thing that they didn't tell the Victorian people until the Thursday before an election was that they had a $6 billion savings strategy that they hadn't confided in them exactly what the plan was. And remember, there was a proposal to privatise, to sell off essential services of the state. All of that, those opposite failed to share with the Victorian people. No wonder they didn't share it with the Victorian people, because it demonstrated the party that's supposed to be fiscally responsible didn't have a clue. And let's not forget, of course, some $28 billion worth of expenditure in their election commitments compared to a much more modest $11 billion offering, both on the capital and combined output side from this side of government. So we know, and I think the Victorian people said it loud and clear, who's the best government to manage the finances of the state, who has a better appreciation of the fundamental principles of accounting. And we start by not confusing family budgets with the state budget. Right. If we did, then of course we would have done the sort of ridiculous strategies that those opposite advocate. We would have prioritised our budget because it was our family budget and not made provision for the well-being of the Victorian people. That's a sign of a misallocation and mispriority of those opposite. We will continue as a government to make investments in the well-being of the Victorian people, to grow the Victorian economy and, of course, to bring the budget back into surplus. But we won't do it precipitously in a way that would undermine that revitalisation of the Victorian economy. There is a reason why the Victorian economy is the strongest performing economy in the nation, and that's because this government has invested in the well-being of the Victorian people. We've shown faith in them, and
Treasurer,
they have returned that
Treasurer.
in spades.
On a point of order, Member for Lowen.
Thank you very much, Speaker. In relation to Standing Order 58, the content of answers must be succinct, and given we're now into our 8th minute, I think that perhaps the Treasurer could wrap up his question. Could you please bring the Treasurer back to finalising his response?
Order! 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 I appreciate the member for Lowen's